Does this person bring me joy? Do I grow from being with them? Do they fit my soul right? Is it respectful? Is this friendship respectful? Is relationship respectful? Do they actually see me? Do they hear me? And do they actually listen to me? So, I talk a lot about discernment, and discernment is a key skill to learn in managing these relationships. But the other thing, the balancing act here, is that people say, oh, this makes me so uncomfortable, this narcissism thing. And it seems like the only way to manage this is to get out of these relationships. And I'm here to tell you there are ways to think about this without having to break up with your friends and family. So let's take this on. I know that people don't like the idea of thinking about having to walk away from people they care about, and I get that. So let me just start it this way. You have a friend. You like this person well enough. You've known them for a long time. There's been a few annoying things, maybe some pink flags, but they usually aren't deal breakers. Over the years, you've been very open and flexible with this friend. You've shared personal issues in your life, deep personal issues and vulnerabilities in your life with them. They aren't always the greatest listener, but you've trusted them with what you've told them. You've changed your schedule around to accommodate them. Your friend asks you if you want to go to a big ticket concert, hard to get tickets coming into town. She's driving. She asks you, can you charge the tickets? She'll pay you back. They're impossible to get. So you do. You get the tickets, but she cancels 2 hours before. You can't find someone else. And then she argues about paying for the tickets. Let's say the tickets came to $2,000, some enormous amount of money. So you may be thinking this video has some am I the asshole vibes, but it doesn't. Just put it out there. What would you do? Would you dump this person as a friend, even if you've known them for many years? If she pays you back, would you go back to normal like nothing happened? And what if this wasn't the first time she'd done something like this? This kind of expensive flakiness or real insensitivity, and she acts like she's done nothing wrong. When we have had long histories and linked lives with people close to us, family, close friends, partners, even long-standing colleagues, we have to think about how we can use these relationships as a place to practice discernment. I've had a lot of people talk about this with me and clients and whatnot. And because discernment is so important, I thought to sort of cobble all of this together as a technique that many of you could think about. Like, listen, I'm a former professor. So for the last 25 years, I've been thinking of everything as grades, A, B, C, D, and so on. A is good, F is bad, that kind of thing. I have found it useful when talking with clients and thinking of ways to calibrate around, especially the narcissistic relationship in your life, to think about it as sort of a leveling/grading system, right? The people in your life who are A's, they have a full access pass. These are the people you'd pick up at the airport during rush hour. You trust them. You're open with them. You know if you gave them money, they'd definitely give it back. You could be your full authentic self with these people. The luckiest people among us have family members who are level A. Really lucky people have a spouse who's a level A. A's are rare and wonderful, and I think mental health very much. If we have A's, we're going to be in pretty good shape. But what if an A hurts you? It hurts you more than once. Can you demote them to a B? I think so. B's are still close. Maybe not late night rush hour airport close. Maybe you don't tell them all the things that are happening in your life, and you're aware that you need to be a little bit more careful. You can't be uncensored like you are with the A's. A person may come into your life as a B. Maybe you just know them at work or you don't agree with some of their beliefs. Well, what if a B messes up? They become, a C. Now, the C's are the people what we might call like, I'm having a big barbecue and they aren't terrible to have around and they're kind of fun. You may not ever knock yourself out to do a one-on-one with them. You may say happy birthday on social media, but the intimacy piece here is dropped. There may be some red flags you see that make you uncomfortable. You're not so close. You're definitely not sharing secrets. You're more guarded. You're not your full self with them. You don't feel safe being your full self with them. You may expend a fair amount of bandwidth to be careful with them. They've gaslighted you in the past, and you sure as hell aren't turning your life around for these folks. Now, you might be thinking, ooh, what if a C does me wrong? Can this elevator go lower? Yes, it can to the Ds. Now, a D is not a passing grade. So these are people who are not good for you. They may be around in your life because you work with them, they're a friend of a friend, they're an extended family member. You may not have any kind of independent relationship with them, but you have had experiences with them where you've learned you cannot trust them. They may have done pretty significantly wrong to you in the past. Yes, the elevator has one more stop, and yes, some people do get Fs. Fs are the folks who have really harmed you more than once, chronically and badly. Or they've harmed people who are close to you. They may be harmful to you. Now, the point of this exercise is not to open up your address book on your phone and give everyone a grade. What it is a way to think about how to maintain internal boundaries towards people in our lives and to practice that fine art of discernment. You have that A. We love our A's, right? That A, though, starts being a little bit gaslighty, irresponsible. They lie. They hurt you more than a few times. You may roll them down to a B or even a C. It means you're more careful with them. You don't trust them to follow through. It's like touching a hot stove. Ideally, you don't do it more than once. This isn't just meant to be a mental experiment. It's a way of giving yourself permission to say, I'm not feeling this anymore. This doesn't feel safe anymore. I'm not going to cut people off. That doesn't feel good either. But I'm going to give this person a little less access to me, to all of me, to protect myself from invalidation or stress or disrespect. It doesn't need to be all or nothing. The lady with those concert tickets who spent $2,000 and ended up, holding the bag on one of them, may not have wanted to say goodbye for good with this friend, but she had started to burn out on the up and down with this person, and she may learn to say, next time this person asks, I think I'll pass on the tickets. Maybe we could just do something like get a cup of coffee next time. Discernment is a very subtle process. It's the willingness to pay attention to new data, integrating it and giving ourselves permission to respect ourselves and be careful about how we show up and protect our vulnerabilities. Discernment is everything when it comes to managing narcissistic relationships. Having some kind of system that allows you to understand how you can show up with them. Yeah, you can use colors if you want numbers. I use letter grades. It's what works for me. It allows you to stay in touch and give you a framework for a very nuanced process to set boundaries that work and still be able to maintain people in your life that you feel close to. We often don't mindfully approach our relationships, which is what often gets us into hot water, especially with relationships that have been around for a long time. It's painful to demote an A from a C, but it's crucial that we slow down, pay attention. You can almost view it as like a little slider, a slider that goes back and forth and settle in a place with a person that feels safe and informed. Not everyone in our lives is created equal, and while the most toxic folks in your life will not appreciate your discernment, discernment becomes a way to maintain your social networks in a far more thoughtful manner. One thing narcissistic abuse does to us, it takes away our discernment. We are almost taught to believe relationships are all or nothing. You're either all in and getting absolutely abused, or you've got to completely cut off, but that also feels unsettling because you may lose other people. But when you can start to see not so much, I'm going to bring this one down. Again, that's why I use this idea of a slider, a very, very gradual kind of, or a little, like a volume button. I'm turning this one down a little bit. This doesn't feel good. That kind of safety, that kind of sort of way to think about setting boundaries internally for yourself, doesn't mean you're cutting bait, but it does mean that you are being mindful and aware and honoring what allows you to feel more comfortable and safe, armed with realistic expectations in all of your relationships, healthy and not. This narcissist bingo idea was born out of a conversation I had with someone who was having to learn to manage a relationship with a sort of a new difficult family member that had come into her life. And she said she'd actually been inspired on her side by Gilmore Girls. I don't watch Gilmore Girls. But it also relates, though, to something some of us do when we do this with ourselves when we're watching like a predictable television show, like a Christmas show or an awards show. Like if it's an award show like the Oscars, we might play bingo. Like we mark our card each time something happens. For example, if we were watching something like the Academy Awards, we might mark our bingo card each time someone thanks their mother or gives too long a speech, that kind of thing, right? So you see where I'm going? So narcissist bingo is a whole other thing, and I think it'd be very good for you. In this case, where this idea kind of came from, the person was trying to cope with a narcissistic person that's part of a larger family system, and there wasn't much that she could do about it. She was not going to be able to change this person. The narcissistic person's behavior is terrible, and she had to learn and figure out a way to cope when she encountered this person because she didn't have a lot of options in terms of not going to these events where this person was. Now, narcissist bingo is a very useful strategy for when you are going into an interaction with someone you know is antagonistic or narcissistic, and you need something to help you not lose your mind during these encounters. So it goes like this. You're going into a situation, you probably already know it, where you're going to have to interact with a narcissistic person. It could be a work meeting, it could be a family event, it could be a party, and there's nothing you can do about it. You gotta go. It's something you gotta go to. Now, you know confronting them is pointless, and it wouldn't be good for you, and it's not going to change their behavior. So when you're playing narcissist bingo, you pay attention. And each time they do something toxic, ideally you make a note, but if that's not possible, you can even make a little tick mark on a piece of paper, but try and remember each toxic thing they do and count them up. To play narcissist bingo, you kind of need a number in your mind. I tend to choose 5. 5's a good one because 5 in a row is how the game of bingo traditionally works. So you start counting. So let's pretend you're in one of these situations, right? You're with a family member or whatever. You're making your count. So they make a jab comment about your weight. Boom. They gaslight you when you talk about a story from your past. Number 2. They interrupt you repeatedly when you're trying to share something with the group. Number 3. They roll their eyes or do something contemptuous while you're talking. Number 4. They unfavorably compare you to someone else. 5. Bam! Bingo! Now, there's a couple of ground rules. Don't scream bingo, because that would make you seem a little bit off, because you're the only one playing this game in your head. If you have someone else playing it along with you, great. Still don't scream bingo. I have to say that when I have used the narcissism bingo technique with clients, it's all they can do to not smile once number 5 hits, which obviously makes everyone else in the meeting or around the table a little confused, especially since everyone is sort of having to deal with this rather narcissistic person. And I have to say, it's usually the narcissistic person who's the one who's the most put off and angry if you do smile. You're smiling because you got bingo. So try to keep that smile under control or just smile inside. Now, I personally like to up the stakes on narcissist bingo and give myself a prize. I don't know, maybe something like a little treat or something on a wish list or in a cart I have running on a, like Amazon or something, or little things like a Kit Kat or a book I want to order. So when the narcissistic person I'm having to endure hits number 5, it's all I can do to not just do a happy dance or grab my phone and place my order. Listen, sometimes the prize I give myself is not a thing. It's an hour of TV time or something like that, or that I'm going to stop working early. But it's a prize, and I'm happy about it. You might be thinking, oh God, Dr. Ramani, are you just being petty? Actually, it's not petty. When we're in a narcissistic situation that we feel like we can't control, monitoring their actions can give us a sense of control. And it can help pull us back out of that chronic state of hurt and anger we feel and recognize that this is a them thing. It's not you. And we can start counting up their attacks. It doesn't fully take away the sting. This sense of what the hell am I doing even interacting with this toxic person? What's wrong with me? Might be happening. But in many of these cases, these may be obligatory interactions we just can't dodge. Older parents, extended family, in-laws, icky colleagues, terrible bosses. It's always great when the meeting's on Zoom because you can totally write it down. No one can see. And you can order your prize right then and there without folks noticing because you could be on your phone, right? So when we can give ourselves even these little tiny tools to cope in real time, game it up a little bit, but perhaps lift some of the self-blame and really put a finer point on that idea that it's not you, it's them. It can go a long way to radical acceptance and coping with the BS that is the narcissistic relationship. Now, for those of you in narcissistic relationships with people you live with, that's a lot of games of bingo, and you cannot buy yourself that many prizes. But once you hit that 5, and that might happen several times a day, it may be a sign to take some kind of break, to breathe, to do something to bring yourself back into you. Because listen, after you hit 5, you're starting to get worn a little thin. I have to say, I like to suggest some variants on the whole bingo thing too. I sometimes do a sort of latency thing. I time how long it takes a toxic person to drop the first bomb, and I make a bet with myself on how long it's going to take them, like in an hour. And I'll say, in an hour, they're going to say such and such. And if they go longer than an hour, then my bet doesn't pay. But it's just a way of managing the dread that these relationships can raise. When the bad thing happens, whatever it is, an insult, a victimized complaint, a gaslight, a tantrum, the tension sort of relieves, especially if they do it early enough that you win the bet, because you do win the bet. And you're like, oh, I know I read that situation right, and I get a prize. I don't necessarily recommend you making a bingo card. Obviously, every narcissistic relationship is different. Some of you are dealing more with the woe is me, victimized nonsense. Some of you are dealing with passive-aggressive stuff. Some of you are dealing with judgment and shaming. Some of you are dealing with lots of gaslighting. Some of you are dealing with coercive control. So unless you made a bingo card personalized to your narcissistic relationship, it's kind of hard to make universal ones. So count those toxic behaviors up. Have your prize picked out. You know, like at a carnival, when you go to the carnival and you throw and you get the hoop around the clown's nose or something, you get to pick a stuffed animal. This is sort of like that. Except the one thing I got to tell you, you are much more likely to hit bingo during a dinner party with a narcissist than you are ever to win a carnival game. Good luck. Be nice to yourselves and pick yourselves up some good prizes, because I promise you, you're definitely going to hit bingo. Today, I'm going to give you a simple way to remember how to deal with any kind of narcissist in any part of your life. Very simply, I'm going to tell you to go deep. Now, DEEP is an acronym, and it's a nice and intuitive acronym. Since narcissistic people are so superficial, it would seem that the antidote would be to go deep. Now, those of you who have been to my seminars and read what I've written and all of that, you've heard me talk about the concept of going deep ad nauseum. But if you have not, I wanted to make sure that everyone has this topic and this technique at easy reach. So let's break down what DEEP stands for, and then really break it down. The D stands for defend, the E stands for engage, the next E stands for explain, and that P stands for personalize. So simply put, if you have to deal with someone who is narcissistic, do not defend, engage, explain, or personalize. So let's go deep in understanding what this really means. First, don't defend, D. It's the most common mistake that people make in the face of narcissistic people. Now listen, when someone is accusing us of something we did not do, or is projecting their dysfunction on us, we want to defend ourselves. This is particularly pronounced when we are being gaslighted. It can be a sort of eternal circle of hell when a narcissistic person is gaslighting you about something, anything, and you defend yourself, and they double down, and you keep defending, and on and on. And you may be wondering, but listen, somebody is accusing me of something I didn't do. I want to defend myself. defend away. But remember the cardinal rule of any narcissistic relationship. They aren't listening to you, and they don't really care what you have to say. So you're putting a lot of effort in and giving them lots of narcissistic supply when you keep defending yourself. Especially if you start escalating and your volume goes up, and then the narcissistic person takes a certain amount of glee in being the one who keeps it together while you keep defending and defending. It's a waste of time and energy. You know what you did or didn't do. You know your intentions. They aren't listening to you, so don't defend or do any of that with them. A relationship with a narcissistic person is like living in an eternal kangaroo court. You are forever defending yourself against false charges with no due process. Second, don't explain. E. This is a riff on not defending. But since a relationship with a narcissistic person seems to be an eternal misunderstanding, mostly because their insecurity is being chronically triggered, because they're not capable of self-reflective capacity, the fact is they'll take everything you say and put a really malevolent, mean-spirited twist on it. Basically, as a rule, narcissistic people think everyone is either out to get them or is envious of them. Now, a major challenge with narcissism is they hold firm to only their narrative and cannot make room for the possibility that other people have their own experiences and interpretations of events. Again, just like with when you defend, when you explain, you are talking to someone who is not listening, and you keep going down the same rabbit hole again and again. So many times a person wants the narcissistic person to just understand them. And if they could just understand them, it would be fine. Listen, they aren't listening to you, so don't explain. It's a waste of your psychological energy and really contributes to a sense of feeling as though you are losing any sense of control or even sanity in the world, because to explain, really put the time into explaining and really attempt to make your point and then have it ignored is extremely invalidating. Next, E, don't engage. Now this is actually just gray rocking, right? Not much comes out of really engaging with a narcissistic person. And by engaging, I mean sharing your opinions, being authentic, taking on difficult conversations, being vulnerable, talking about sensitive matters, offering feedback or a meaningful, mild critique. Don't do it. More often than not, if you engage, you'll end up in gaslighting or invalidation or just general discomfort. I actually hate gray rocking because it saps people of their authenticity. And at best, it is an impoverished form of human contact. And yet, gray rocking is an essential survival tool if you have to maintain a relationship with a narcissist. This may be anything from co-parenting to a divorce that feels too difficult to take on, to a parent or person from your family of origin, to a boss in a workplace you cannot yet leave. In the long term, remaining in any kind of narcissistic relationship is not good for your health. Gray rocking is like driving on a spare tire. It's not meant for a long-term drive. If you find yourself having to gray rock in the long term, make sure you develop other sources of social support. This may be friends, support groups, therapy, because the emptiness and hollowness of a gray rocked world or primary relationships means that you need some places where you can have full and rich social interactions. Next is don't personalize. P for personalize. Now this is tough guidance because these relationships feel personal, and it is personal because you're hurt and you're having real emotional reactions. However, what I mean is don't personalize their behavior. You're not engaging in their behavior. You're not responsible for it. You aren't the one gaslighting. They are. You aren't the one minimizing. They are. You aren't the one behaving badly. They are. They may try to pitch it that their behavior is your fault, but as adults, we are responsible for our own behavior. tempting as it may be to foist our behavior onto other people. So when the narcissistic person is communicating in a way that feels dehumanizing, it is not because you are not enough, it's because they are treating you badly. Self-blame is such a universal part of narcissistic abuse. To not personalize means to steer clear of that self-blame. Emotional abuse is not okay. Never. So to review one more time, don't D, defend, don't E, explain, don't E, engage, and don't P, personalize, deep. Keep that with you. When you find yourself getting sucked back into their vortex, remember it deep. And this is not just about verbal communication. It is about texting, email, any form of communication. Don't get into the ultra-long text messages or the multi-page emails where you defend, explain, etc. Don't personalize their hostile texts. Antagonistic communication is what they do, and a narcissist loves them a good text battle. Healthy people shouldn't like these. They're not good for you. But narcissistic people love the ability to use their electronic device as a weapon to attack someone with. Some of you are watching this and thinking that if I don't defend or explain, aren't I just being a doormat and letting them walk all over me? Listen, they already are walking all over you. This technique is just meant to decrease the duration of the walkover. Remember that so much of these narcissistic relationships are about baiting. They want you to defend and explain. They like when other people get worked up and agitated so they can calmly sit there and behave as though they are superior and sort of not being dramatic while you're explaining and defending more and more. If you can think of the deep technique as a way of not giving them narcissistic supply, then it feels less like you being a doormat and more like you not engaging with someone who treats you with disrespect. It can help to have other spaces in which to talk about the relational dynamics, so at least you can have a healthy sounding board. It just will not happen with a narcissistic person. I want you to reflect on the people in your life. And I want you to think about what would happen is if you lifted up each person and held them up and say, does this person bring me joy? If you only kept the people in life who did bring you joy, how many people would you have left? You might want to drop that in the comments. I'd love to hear how many of you say, yeah, if I had that standard, I'd probably lose half the people in my life. So let's talk about this. Let's take the principles of home organizing brought to you by Marie Kondo and apply it to how you manage the difficult people in your life. Now, not too long ago, organizer and lifestyle guru Marie Kondo launched a movement that's centered around sort of home organization, but almost in a healing way, clearing clutter and purging the many things that bury us to sort of clear us out psychologically. Now, I'm simplifying this here. But basically, to apply her principles, her basic approach is that a person commit to uncluttering and then discarding. And as you make these decisions about what you're going to discard, reflect on whether this item or these items bring you joy. Lift the underwear, does this bring me joy? Her approach focuses on things and clutter, old dishes, dresses, VHS tapes, boxes of stuff, but it's all stuff. And stuff is hard enough to purge. People will say, oh, but I wore that dress to my sister's wedding, even though the dress is 10 sizes too small, or I don't know, maybe those dishes are going to be worth something someday. Maybe we should hold on to them, or maybe my kids will want that someday. So we keep this stuff around until this stuff overtakes us. We struggle with throwing our stuff out because of this extra meaning we ascribe to it, including that dress that's 10 sizes too small. So why do we keep this stuff around? Possibly for nostalgia. The item may remind us of an event or some memory of the past that we want to hold on to and commemorate. For example, we may hold on to the candles from an old birthday cake. You may feel guilt. Ugh, I feel so bad throwing out those old recipe books of my grandmother or the encyclopedias my mom gave me. You may hold on to stuff out of obligation. I feel like I have to hold on to my children's stuff from their childhood bedrooms. What if they want an archive of their lives someday? Sometimes we hold on to stuff out of hope. Strange hope, like, oh, maybe this lunchbox will be worth something one day. Or maybe I can sell all my stuff on eBay and make lots of money. And then there's always fear. Fear of, well, you might need this item. Like, what if I need this old broken lawnmower one day and then I don't have it? Or what if I throw this out and I forget about my mother? Then there's economic necessity. I can't afford to throw out my old coats. I can't afford to buy a new coat every year, even though the old coats don't fit you. Another reason we hold on to stuff is lack of information. I didn't know that this entire collection of books have all been digitized for free, and I can get them if I want and get them off my shelf. And sometimes keeping stuff is simply a distortion. We want to keep the dress we wore to the family wedding, and yet it was a horrible night with criticism from an angry, narcissistic parent, tense arguments with your sister who was the one getting married, watching your aunt get drunk and fall over herself, and then it was just a replaying of all of your family dysfunction. Still, you want to keep the dress, right? So this stuff can all be a trigger, and we hold on to it. Perhaps we think we can shift the narrative, remember the dress, and ignore the dysfunction. So you got the stuff piece, and that Marie Kondo has nailed that. Like, she is a revolution unto herself. So now let's jump the rails a little bit, and let's stop talking about tossing stuff, but let's talk about something else. Let's talk about removing unhealthy people from our lives. It's not healthy to live in lots of clutter. It's distracting, it's frustrating. It may actually have cost lots of money to acquire all that stuff, and it may even cost more money to get rid of all that stuff. And it could even be dangerous if too much of this stuff is accumulated in your house and in your garage, and you could trip over it, or it'll harbor rats or something. I don't know. It's just not good for you. If you can't get rid of an old dress or an old lawnmower, it isn't going to be that easy to get rid of people, is it? So let's take a page out of Ms. Kondo's playbook and think this through. She says we need to commit, declutter, and reflect on whether something brings you joy. What if we reflect on whether a person brings us joy? This may not be something you're going to set out to do on a rainy Saturday to get your closet in order. But this process of decluttering your personal life may be something that you start paying attention to. And the next time, whenever you're managing a toxic person, consider why this is a person who you keep. Much like the dress that doesn't fit or the lawnmower that no longer works. So first, let's consider the question, why do we keep people around? I mean, a lot of it is probably the same reason we keep things around. Nostalgia, guilt, obligation, lack of information, hope, fear, economic necessity, and even distortion. But if you can take that moment, really take a moment, and lift the people in your life up, psychologically at least, and give them a long, hard look and ask, does this person bring me joy? Do I grow from being with them? Do they fit my soul right? Is it respectful? Is this friendship respectful? Is this relationship respectful? Do they actually see me? Do they hear me? And do they actually listen to me? If they don't, then according to these sort of cleanup procedures, one would argue, you should probably let them go. Okay, but I'm pushing it a bit, aren't I, right? People aren't dresses or lawnmowers, and letting go of people isn't quite as simple as just pulling a truck up to the Goodwill store. But all of that clutter of difficult people in your life is taking a toll. Sometimes You can't let the thing go. The nostalgia or the need, it's too much. In those cases, what do you do? When you can't let something go, maybe you can't leave it on a shelf in the house, but maybe you put them in an attic or a storage unit. But what if this is a person? Maybe you feel like you can't let go of someone important to you. And that could even be an intense relationship, like an adult child or a parent or a spouse. Well, you start by setting boundaries. I don't know, maybe setting boundaries is the equivalent of getting a storage unit. You put something in a storage unit, it's kind of out of sight and out of mind. But setting boundaries takes a toll. In a way, what do? You pay rent on the storage unit, right? And here you're putting the psychological toll of setting boundaries and keeping that difficult person in your life. As always, you're going to need to set boundaries and have realistic expectations and not engage and not defend and not explain and not personalize. It will still be uncomfortable, like still having all those boxes of stuff around you. You may not use the stuff, but they are still around and kind of staring at you, and you're always being reminded. But it is intentional, and you are aware that this is stuff you need to keep a distance from. And sometimes you will make the decision to actually let a person go. It's never easy, but sometimes it is the only way forward for some people. And perhaps that is the painful equivalent of tossing stuff away. And the other issue that scares people is recognizing that once you start distancing from people or even cutting them out of your life altogether, other people are not going to like it. And that's what I call that gaslighting by tribe, right? Everyone's going to say, well, he's not that bad. Why are you doing this? And you will find out that distancing from just one person will result in other people gaslighting you, shaming you, or otherwise telling you there is something wrong with you for not wanting to spend more time with your family. There's little recognition of how abusive it is, but there's something wrong with you because you don't want to be with the family. And all of that is part of the process of letting people go. It's a bit like clearing out that closet. You don't just tend to go into your closet and throw out one thing. Once one thing goes, you start reconciling yourself with tossing out lots of things. It's a tough balancing act. And once you start distancing from people in your life, even when you explain to other people in a very clear way why you're setting these boundaries, and by the way, you don't owe anybody an explanation for why you're doing this, you may also encounter people I call forgiveness shamers. These are the people who will tell you to forgive. And the fact of the matter is, forgiving is no one else's decision but yours. This idea of checking in and assessing whether something or someone brings you joy, personally, I think it's far more important with people than it is with things. So many of our human relationships are undertaken from a place of obligation. Oh, I have to call my family. I have to be in touch with my family. I have to make this marriage work. And that even extends to work. I have to make this job work. I have to get along with my boss. I have to get along with my colleagues. And I'm a realist. I wish we all lived in a world in which all relationships that were in our lives are the ones that fill us with joy. But it's not possible, and it's just not that simple. The problem is just the balance. Too many people are surrounded by too many joyless, toxic, difficult relationships, with very few relationships in their lives that bring them joy. It's the equivalent of having a closet full of 100 items of clothing that don't fit you or are worn out or out of fashion or that you don't like to wear. And in that closet are 5 pieces of clothing that you love to wear. The difference is that at least with that closet, you sort through all that stuff you don't like to wear and you keep wearing the same things over and over again, right? But with people, The challenge is you spend far more time managing the difficult people in your life who do not bring you joy, and you forget about, or you don't build in time with the people who do bring you joy. Why? Because the ones who don't bring you joy, you feel guilty and you feel like you have to spend time with them. I have said many times that when we hear about the various health interventions out there, we always hear about how you should get enough sleep, and you should eat healthy fruits and vegetables and grains, and you should hydrate and exercise and engage in preventative health care and wear sunscreen. You've heard all this, right? These are the things that are supposed to be important for your health. We're good. We're really good with telling people you shouldn't eat potato chips, you shouldn't eat fast food. But somehow, it seems like we don't want to share the biggest health intervention of all. To remind people to stop spending so much time with difficult, invalidating people. While I've been using this analogy of decluttering, obviously this is a lot more profound than that. This is about getting the unhealthy out of your life. A person and the associated tension and stress that are filling you up with stress hormones and the thoughts and the emotions that are not good for you. That's what you need to get less of in your life. So as you go through your days, I want you to start doing this as an exercise. Think about the people in your life, in your mind at least. You can make a list if you want. Hold them up in your mind and ask yourself, does this person bring me joy? If the answer is no, then take a minute and ask yourself, why am I keeping this person in my life so steadily? Why do I devote so many resources to them? Or at the very least, then ask yourself, why am I not setting better boundaries against someone who is not good for me? Here's my hope for you. I hope that your closets, drawers, heart, mind, and soul get decluttered really soon. I'd rather see a person that has an overflowing closet full of bell-bottoms and 1980s clothes than I would a person who has a life full of people who are difficult and invalidating. So go forth and declutter your personal lives. Thanks again. I hope this was helpful, and I'd love to hear from you and see if this technique works for you to frame it this way. It's funny how we can declutter stuff, but we actually can't declutter the thing that might have a bigger effect on our health. Thanks again for tuning in.